Welcome to the Psychedelia Podcast, where we talk about the third wave of psychedelics. Through our many wide-ranging conversations with scientists, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and event organizers, we bring you an exclusive look into the many minds of the psychedelic world. It's time to let the word out about psychedelics and how they can be used as tools to benefit both the individual and the community. Welcome to the third wave.
Hey listeners, and welcome back to the Psychedelia Podcast. Part of what we're trying to do at the third wave is to incubate local psychedelic communities. In fact, we're rolling out a project fairly soon called Find the Others, which is a program that's going to help local communities start psychedelic societies and develop individuals who can lead those psychedelic societies in an effective and pragmatic way. And so on the podcast this week, we have Ashley Booth, who is from the Aware Project, which is a psychedelic organization based in Southern California, out of Los Angeles originally, but Ashley also does events in San Diego. And in this episode, Ashley tells us about her transformative experience with 5-MeO-DMT that changed her from a fairly materialist, reductionist agnostic to a believer in these other aspects of spirituality, which ended up leading her to quit her job as a scientist and pursue a career in psychedelic therapy. So we talk about a number of things, including difficulties in setting up a psychedelic community and what you can do as a listener to find the others, to find other people who are also interested in psychedelics. If you live in a major city right now, there may or may not be a psychedelic community. If there is, try to join it and try to go to some events and get to know those people. When we start building community around these substances, amazing transformations happen. And the better community, the stronger community that we can build, the more leverage we will have in the future when we want to make these substances available to everyone who would like to use them, not just wealthy white people. So that's really important. Just two general announcements, but I also give these announcements in almost every other podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider making a donation to the Patreon page. I'm trying to make the third wave and its content production autonomous from all other projects. Ideally, in the future, we'll be able to support all the costs that are associated with the third wave community resource and page by Patreon donations. But really, to make that occur, we need your support. And we need your contributions. Everything that we have on the site is for free at the moment, yet I assure you, spend a lot of time and money in doing all of this. When you want to make something that's professional, it requires income. So if you do have $2 a month or $5 a month, $10, $20, $50 a month that you can donate to changing the way mainstream culture perceives psychedelic substances, we would really appreciate that help. That would go a very long way in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And you can do that at patreon.com/thethirdwave. Second announcement, join our forum, the Third Wave Forum. Originally, the idea came from, hey, let's just do a microdosing forum. And now it's turned into, no, let's talk about all things related to psychedelia, including the research, including microdosing. But also, we talk about these podcasts in that forum. We talk about the content that we produce. We talk about local psychedelic communities. We talk about conferences and events. And now that we've onboarded our new team member, Danya, who is a woman from Indonesia who lives in the Netherlands right now, she's going to be handling all our social media, email, Patreon page, and the forum, and she's brilliant. She's very good. The forum is going to get more and more lively. So please check it out if you get a chance. Register, sign up, say hi, and that's going to keep generating momentum and more progress. So yeah, that's it. Guys, I hope you really enjoy the show. If you do enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes. It will take just about a minute of your time. And again, it would help tremendously in what we're doing. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. And I hope you have an excellent Sunday or Monday or week or month or life. It's a pleasure to spend this time with you. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Psychedelia Podcast. We have probably one of the more important guests on the show today. Her name is Ashley Booth, and she's from the Aware Project. And Ashley focuses on building psychedelic community
in the greater Los Angeles area. And as we've spoken about on this podcast, but also more broadly on the third wave before, a tremendously important aspect of making these substances more available to those who want to use them is to build grassroots community. And so I wanted to bring Ashley on the show to give you guys a perspective and overview of what she's doing at the Aware Project and things that she's learned from it. So Ashley, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Aware Project and how it got started?
Sure. So our full name is the Aware Project Rethinking Psychedelics. It was an idea that came through for me a couple of years ago. I guess it really started about four and a half years ago when I had a really big experience with psychedelics, as what inspires many people, I suppose, in the community that are working in this capacity, and felt really compelled to contribute to more people knowing and having better information about this stuff. And I think when after having such a big, beautiful experience and then coming back, and also while I was in such a beautiful glow within the experience, but what happened afterwards was a sense of a sadness because more people didn't have access to these substances should they want to have an experience with them or have accurate information about it. So that really kind of planted a seed, I suppose. And from there, at first I thought it was going to be more of a social media campaign, but my ex-boyfriend was an event producer for several years, and he had been running this salon series of talks sort of based off of the TED style. And so when I was looking around, so I live in Los Angeles, and I was looking around, I'm like, well, I wonder if there's other, people around here, like some sort of psychedelic society in Los Angeles, because I knew that there was a lot of different types of groups up in San Francisco, north of us. And I started looking around, and there was just next to nothing. And I was really surprised, considering, we're like one of the largest congregations of humans in this country. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I could do a bicycle day event to celebrate the discovery of LSD down here. And then a friend suggested, well, why don't you get some hype going for the bicycle day event by doing some smaller events, bringing in different speakers. So it started off in January of 2015. And I just got a speaker. And then the next month I got another speaker, and then we had another speaker, and then we had bicycle day. And then it just kind of continued. And the community started to grow more and more. And it became, it was really a way to start to bring people together and have conversations about this stuff. Because there's a lot of medicine work going on in this city, a lot of plant medicine, a lot of ayahuasca. But as far as connecting all of the different communities and people that are, any kind of psychedelics, not just plant medicine. So my goal has really been to try and connect to all of these existing communities and also get it out there to individuals that have been exploring these things on their own, but not had a community. So it's kind of evolved over the last couple of years. And now we have 3 events a month with predominantly local speakers. Almost the entire time I've been able to grab local speakers, which is pretty cool. And we have an event downtown in Los Angeles, an event on the west side. And then last year we started doing events in San Diego. So we're now not just Los Angeles, but we're all of Southern California. So it's been an exciting progression of things, and it's taken my life in a completely different direction. But I'm really thrilled to be contributing in this way and seeing how things unfold.
So you mentioned this beautiful experience that you have, and I think, as you mentioned, a lot of us have these experiences who are engaged and involved in the psychedelic space. Even a lot of the researchers, I think, have had these experiences, even if they don't necessarily talk about them. Well, how did was that the first experience that you had, or was it just a particularly transformative one that made you want to take the initiative to start the community? And B, how did that experience, what was pre-Ashley and post-Ashley like from that, from having that experience?
Yeah. So I guess I'll back up a little bit. So my background's actually, I have a master's degree in oceanography, and I worked in marine biology and oceanography for 9 years. So my life was mostly surrounded by, scientists and environmental initiatives, and happening in parallel. About my second summer out of college, I went to Burning Man for the first time, and not knowing at all what I was getting myself into. I had never done any kinds of psychedelics, or I had smoked cannabis before that, but other than that, was a complete novice. And when I went there, I did MDMA for the first time. And it just completely opened me up to a whole different way of being, that, and connecting to people in a different way. And then also just having a sense of community that I had never had before growing up being at Burning Man. And so I've gone to Burning Man every year for the last 10 years now. And it has, completely reshaped the person that I am and the kind of way I want to impact the world. So I had different experiences with different psychedelics over the years, but the one that really catalyzed the really, really big shift was 4 years ago. I had an experience with 5-MeO-DMT, which was the most important experience of my life, period. And it connected me to a part of myself that I didn't have access to before. I had such a heart-opening experience, and I would say a mystical experience, which many people do on that substance. And it completely shifted my paradigm. And I felt like I was given such a gift to be able to have that experience. And for whatever reason, I know many people that do that substance now, and some get that kind of experience and others don't, but for some reason, I guess my system was just ready for it. So I would say, before that experience, I was a pretty more of a logic kind of left brain thinking person, and I feel like having that experience connected me to my right brain, and makes me feel like I'm more of a balanced person now. And I feel really grateful to have both of those sides of myself to be able to move through and navigate through this space, especially now because there's a navigating through a lot of the different ways that people have interpreted their psychedelic experiences. Having a science brain and that science background has really helped me to keep my feet on the ground, while I have my heart opened and my, the top of my head blown off into the universe. So I feel like that's some of the way that some of the stability and that I've been able to maintain as I've changed my life quite dramatically over the last couple of years. So I quit my job in science about just over a year ago, which was a big jump for me, with the interest of getting into therapy and, eventually, working towards helping people with these medicines once they become legal. So yeah, it's been quite an unfolding. And I guess I can get into it now. I mean, through doing the AWARE project, I got connected more and more to MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And they decided to do one of the phase 3 clinical trials of MDMA psychotherapy for PTSD here in Los Angeles. So I was able to help some of the people get connected to therapists and other people in my community the community that I gathered. And then I applied to be part of the study in some way, as a staff member. I didn't, don't have the background to be a therapist yet, but I ended up getting chosen to be the study coordinator for the clinical trial. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be a part of that and to be starting the next step of my, journey along this path. And then I also just got into grad school. And so I'll be starting in the fall, do a master's in social work, and in the interest of getting on the path to becoming a licensed therapist. So yeah, my life is completely taken a 180.
You sound busy.
But
you sound busy now.
I'm very busy. I'm very busy. But what is it? My boyfriend came up with a phrase. He says, busy but blessed.
That's a good way of looking at it. Now, with 5-MeO-DMT, for any listeners who are maybe unfamiliar with that, it's the toad medicine, right? It is. Yeah. It comes from the glands of the bufo alvarius. Is that how you say
Alvarius,
it? Alvarius, something like that. What was your experience like with that? Because we haven't had a guest on the show yet who's talked about that. How did it compare to like smoking DMT, for example, or even like just what was the experience like in general?
Yeah, so I have quite a bit of experience now with that, because I do work at a clinic in Mexico that works with the toad medicine. So yeah, it's the substance itself is actually found in several plants in the bufo toxin of the Sonoran desert toad. So you can, and you can also make it synthetically. But and then the other more interesting part is that it's made in our bodies naturally. Both NN-DMT, which is what's in ayahuasca, and 5-MeO-DMT are both made endogenously. And yeah, you can extract the bufotoxin from the glands of the toad. It doesn't hurt the toad, but there are concerns these days about the toads are getting poached, unfortunately. And so, yeah, it's really important to, there's definitely some sustainability concerns. The first several times I did it actually was with a synthetic form. All the forms that I've tried, which is an extracts, a toad version, and a synthetic, all get me to the same place. And then there's just slight different body effects. It was kind of funny because I had two experiences within about a week of each other with different substances, or one was from the toad and then another one was derived from a particular kind of grass and called phalaris grass. And it was kind of funny because when I came out of the experience with the grass, I was, it was like some feeling in my body that was like, this feels planty, and I can't really put my finger out what it feels like. And then when I did the toad about a week later, it's like my body feels toady. There's just a quality to it that it was just felt like more like the essence of the organism that it came from, which was kind of funny. So the experience itself is, I guess I'd like to do a quick PSA announcement about this substance before I get too much more into it, is that it's really, really, I can't stress this enough. You really need to have a trained facilitator with this medicine, because I would consider it, and many other people would consider it, the most powerful psychoactive that we have encountered on this planet yet. And I don't say that lightly. And so it's really important to have someone, this is not the kind of thing that you should be buying off the dark net and just doing, because a lot of stuff can happen during the experience. And while your consciousness is journeying, your body may move around a lot, and you need to have trained sitters to be able to hold space for you, and especially to be able to be there if you have challenge, or even just to be able to hold that space for you as you come out of it, even if you have a really amazing experience. So yeah, can't stress that enough. So yeah, so I was lucky to get connected to a really experienced facilitator, and it's an experience that lasts, I would say, an average of 45 minutes if you really let yourself stay in the experience. Some people, the peak of it comes on in the first 10 to 15 minutes. And a lot of people, and what it seems like is that your consciousness is like your ego structure is dissolving, and which allows your small consciousness to reunite with the big consciousness. And you can put whatever language you want on that. And for me, it felt like a very divine experience. And coming from a person that was a pretty adamant atheist for most of my life, and then, but prior to this experience, I was, I guess I would kind of call myself more of an agnostic, because I was like, I don't know what's going on here, to having a really connected experience was pretty wild. But it's an experience that doesn't really have to do with form and content. I mean, I know I've met a very few amount of people that actually see visions of things. So as far as like ayahuasca or NN-DMT, the visions that people tend to have are of objects or shapes and colors and beings, whereas 5-MeO is more about you're kind of going into this tunnel of iridescent light. And it's incredibly gorgeous. And I would consider it much more of a somatic, and meaning body-based, and heart experience than it is a cognitive experience, at least in the first part of it. So what happened to me is I really very quickly was able to surrender to the dissolving of my ego, and then was just enveloped by this sense of infinite love and compassion. And it was so healing. And when my consciousness sort of started to come back down from the experience, and my ego started to form back together again, I was just crying and feeling so much gratitude for being able to be connected to that, and to feel like I was able to kind of remember something that I had forgotten. And the experiences that I've had since then, I go back to the same place, and it's like I kind of remember where I came from. But what also I think really was important for me was that during the experience I had this sort of, I guess it was a bit of a vision, but I must have had my eyes open at the time, but I didn't really realize it. But I was looking up, I was inside at a house, and I was looking up at the lamp that was on the ceiling, and it was this kind of, in my vision, it looked like this glowing golden orb. And this consciousness that I was interacting with kind of was saying that this was a symbol of all of creation and that all of it was a gift. And so I've really taken that to heart, because I really believe that this experience that we're having in these bodies, whatever it is something to, revel in exploring and trying new experiences and enjoy being in these bodies while we can, and not about necessarily trying to get back to that place of connectedness and bliss, which I know can be kind of rampant, especially in some of the new age community, where it's like, getting back to your bliss. And I really feel like it's more about embracing all aspects of our humanity. But yeah, I mean, after the experience, you cascade kind of back down again and your ego starts to reform. Typically people, that can be a time when you can start to notice different aspects of your personality coming back in, which can be a really good time to kind of notice what's serving you and what's not. And so if people manage to stay, focused as they come back in, they can there's a lot of really subtle insights that can come in the tail end of the experience. Because sometimes people will kind of pop back into their body and then they want to talk about their experience. But I find that if you really just stay inward focused for that time, there's a lot that can come up. So I can go on and on about this.
Yeah, and I'm gonna interrupt you now because I want to dig into something that you had mentioned, and this transition from being an atheist to an agnostic to maybe something beyond that. I've gone through a similar transition. Was raised in a very Christian Protestant home. Didn't really buy it. Transitioned to reading Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and pretty rigorous type of materialist atheism, and then had a number of psychedelic experiences. And at first didn't see the connection between those experiences and kind of consciousness and infinite love. But then as I started to read more Aldous Huxley, I kind of understood that there was this relationship between these experiences and what mystics had experienced, and started to kind of rediscover what it meant to be connected to, this infinite ground of all being, as they sometimes call it, or transcending duality, whatever you want to refer to it as. Can you tell us a little bit more about that transition for you? And, it sounds like the 5-MeO-DMT was a catalyst into something beyond just agnosticism and to an acknowledgement of a greater, bigger consciousness. What about your other psychedelic experiences? What role did those play in maybe helping you reconsider atheism?
Yeah, well, let me get to the first part of your question first. So, yeah, I mean, the transition was, the experience itself was complete bliss and connectedness and such but the integration was intense, because it was I didn't even, my whole sense of reality that I had based on reality was had to be restructured. So, it probably took me a good year and a half to integrate the bulk of that experience. And, it's something that I'm going to continue to be integrating for the rest of my life. But, it didn't help that all of my friends were all scientists and mostly atheists. So I didn't really have a lot of people to talk to. So that was one thing. But I had been doing Kundalini yoga, which is a much more, I would say, spiritual form of yoga. So when I went back to yoga after the experience, and they sing this beautiful song at the end of it that goes, "May the long time sun shine upon you. May all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on." And when I heard that after that experience, I was like, oh, I get it now. And so I ended up doing 9 months of Kundalini yoga teacher training as an attempt to help myself integrate from this experience. And because I didn't come from a religious or spiritual background at all. And so both my parents are in the sciences as well. So I didn't have any kind of context and to put the experience in and a container. And so that really helped me with that. So it was kind of it took a long time. I just have these kind of moments where I'd be at work and then I'd kind of snap into this space. I'd be like, wait a second, I had that experience. It was I could still fall back into my everyday kind of consciousness and then be like, whoa, I went there. So it was a rough transition for a little while, but now I'm kind of on the other end of that and feel very good about where I am and navigating, because, using science as a metric of truth, I think is still an excellent scientific method is really a good, it's really good. But it was sort of like, well, if I believe in some sort of higher power now, does that mean that I believe in aliens and crystals and chakras and, metaphysics and ghosts and all this stuff, and it was like, I don't know. And so, having to create a slightly new metric for myself on how to determine if something is real or not. And, and it's still something that I'm trying to figure out now and is an ongoing thing.
Have you looked to other writers or authors or philosophers to maybe find clarity on that, or people even within your more immediate circle? A couple of people that come to mind for these questions that I struggle with as well, in terms of, there is a sense of spirit, obviously, in this world that has been ignored for a very long time. And rekindling that can often lead to, like what you're saying, confusion about the nature of reality. I think if you go from a very reductionist type of worldview where, science is the only thing and atheism, and then you have this experience that you're talking about where it's clear that there is a sense of validity to the mystical experience and what that means and how to incorporate it. For me, I dealt with a similar question, and I remember reading people like William James, who wrote this book called The Varieties of Religious Experience in the early 20th century. Aldous Huxley was very helpful for that. How did you find clarity, around those questions?
Yeah. So, one of the books that really helped me a lot was a book by Neil Donald Walsh called Conversations with God, which is, I guess you could kind of consider it maybe more on the lines of like a channeled book, but he, I don't know if you've heard of the context, but essentially the overview is that the guy was the author nothing was going right in his life, and he lost his job, he got a divorce, all these things happened at the same time, and then he one night started writing this angry letter to God, and this voice in his head started answering, and so he started having a conversation with it and taking dictation, and which past Ashley would have been like, okay, he's crazy. But when I actually was listening to the audiobook of it, and there were just parts of the book that just really resonated. And it was a kind of like perspective on spirituality that felt very uncluttered by a lot of dogma or superstition. And it felt very practical in a lot of ways. So that really, I think, helped form like a way to kind of think about it for me. And let's see what else have I read? I don't know. I haven't done too much reading, but since that experience, I've gotten a lot more into poetry. I love The Prophet by Khalil Gibran and Hafiz and Rumi. It's like I finally feel like I understand the essence of what they're talking about. So in a way, I think none of us, humans have been trying to put words and understand, the infiniteness of the universe since the beginning of time. And so, none of us have been able to capture it fully. But I think one of the things that's so beautiful about psychedelics is that it's not asking you, it's not like a religion or a book or someone asking you to believe something because, someone else has some sort of experience and you should just believe them. But it has the potential to offer a direct experience for yourself. And I believe that in a way, language is flawed intentionally in that I can never fully describe the experience that I had such that it feels like you had the experience. You have to go have it for yourself. So, I think this psychedelic renaissance is giving us an opportunity to move into a place of having our own direct experiential connection to something bigger than ourselves rather than taking someone else's word for it.
And I think that's why it seems, I think psychedelics are one aspect of that. It seems to be like a trigger point or a tie-in from a broad cultural level where we've been without this direct experience. We've really replaced spirituality with materialism for so long that people are, craving. They're absolutely craving this. And I think that's largely, that's a huge reason why we're seeing this reemergence of psychedelics is we just can't continue as a species for that much longer, ignoring this integral part of who we are as, a human being, really.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think these different, substances have sort of been gifted to the world at different times. I mean, we got LSD, which had such a huge impact on Western culture. And then 5-MeO-DMT is a very recent, introduction. I can there are a few South American snuffs that have 5-MeO in them. And I believe there are a couple of different tribes that add particular kind of plants to their ayahuasca brews that add a little bit of 5-MeO. But as far as much modern usage, if there was usage back, with the toads especially, I mean, we've completely lost that knowledge and it's just been having to get rediscovered. So I don't think it's an accident that we're rediscovering it now, because it's such a rapid wake up, and we're getting to this place as a world community that we're needing that more abrupt wake up. So
absolutely,
yeah, I think it's unfolding.
Absolutely. I mean, I recently interviewed Daniel Pinchbeck.
He was just in town.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, we were both just in Amsterdam. So he was doing an event, something about it wasn't about ayahuasca, but it was about cognitive faculties, and he was speaking about ayahuasca. We were both in Amsterdam at the same time, so I got to sit down in person with him. I had met him in Prague, and then again at Horizons, and we talked about these things. And because his entire new book, How Soon Is Now, is about basically ecological crisis that we're facing, and how it may act as a mass initiation for humanity, because psychedelics for thousands of years have been used in indigenous societies to initiate in many cases, and we've lost that, and that has had consequences like a president who acts like a 13-year-old, because a lot of men in our society, and women as well, don't have the maturity that maybe they did in previous cultures and ways of living. But that's veering and digressing, and I'd like to stay on topic. And really what I'd like to do with you, Ashley, is I'd like to get a little bit more into the Aware Project, because
sure.
I love having this conversation. We'd love to keep going, but I also think there's a lot of valuable knowledge that you hold about psychedelic community. Can you, I think one project, we spoke about this on the call before we went live, is that we're working on the third wave is this Find the Others project, which is helping to incubate psychedelic community. If there are any listeners, listening to this, what would you say to people who are maybe thinking about starting a psychedelic community? What should they do, and what's an effective way to run and manage a psychedelic community?
So, yeah, I mean, for one, I think the Find the Others campaign, I think, is an excellent idea. So I've had other people ask me questions about this before. And so I have on our website now a section where if you go to events, and we've got a list of the global community. So if you don't live in the greater Los Angeles area or Southern California area, you can look up and see if you can find other existing communities in a lookup table. And if you don't find someone, I think, in your area, we have something called Start a Group. And if you click on that, it's a downloadable PDF or a Google Doc that's like a how-to guide to gather your local psychedelic community. And it gives some ideas on finding, how kind of more from both what do you create for content in terms, especially, I mean, I have access to a lot of different speakers because I live in a huge metropolitan area. But if you live in a smaller area and don't have access to that, I have a list of other types of things that you could do with a group. Whether it's a book club, or you start a peer support group, or you celebrate, a holiday like Bicycle Day or Sasha Shulgin's birthday, or 9/20 for psilocybin, or maybe you have someone from your community read up on a whole bunch of stuff about a particular topic and then present it to the group. There's a whole bunch of different ways that it could look, or you do like a movie night. So it can look a lot of different ways. And then and then I have some kind of basic tips on doing event production and promotion and finding, and how to make a safe space for what you're doing. Meetup is a really great way to do this. So a Meetup, we consistently get a trickle of new people because your Meetup allows you to get outside of the bubble a bit. Whereas with Facebook, you're kind of doing a little bit more friends of friends, connecting, and you can do Facebook advertising too. But it's been a little tricky to try and figure out how to do that given the topic. And then the other group way I would sort of suggest to people if they're in the US, the Psychedelic Club, which is based in the Midwest, they also have a way, like a startup kit to start your own psychedelic club. And so, our little startup kit here isn't necessarily to start another aware project, but it's just to start your own group and feel empowered to be able to do that yourself. And it's we're out there, and it's sort of interesting, and I'm not quite sure what it is that makes someone go from like having had a couple of experiences to feeling like they want to be part of a bigger community. Because I came from, Burning Man, in which it's all community. And so I when I started this group, it wasn't that I was necessarily looking for psychedelic community because I was so connected to so many different people doing this stuff at Burning Man, but it was more coming from a place of advocacy. But many people have experiences and then they don't have many people to talk to them about. So I think that that's a big driver. And so, part of this evolution over the last couple of years has been trying to figure out how to find those people.
The others, right? Finding the others to some degree. You started the Aware Project in January 2015, and you've now been running it. It's been upwards of 2.5 years. What have you learned about leadership as you've been running and managing and handling the Aware Project?
Good question. Boy, it's been a psychedelic transformative experience just doing this whole thing. Yeah, how do you encourage people to take their own initiative? Because like what I wanted to create with the Aware Project is like an umbrella so that other people could come in with different ideas on advocacy campaigns or events and be able to do them. And then I can, support them with that. And I'm really, as I'm, transitioning to this, to work with MAPS and grad school, I'm really focusing a lot more on that now. And so one way that I'm starting to implement is to ask someone from the community to step up and to commit to doing event production for 3 months. And then I can teach them how to do it and how to make the website, or how to make the event pages, how to connect with the speakers. And I actually have been using, I guess it's a project organizing tool called Wunderlist. And so I made a sort of a template of everything that needs to be done for a particular event. And then I can add people to it. And it gives details about all these different things. And then what the idea would be is that person would then teach the next person who wants to step up for 3 months. And that way nobody gets burned out, because I definitely kind of burned myself out about a year and a half in, because I was just trying to do too many things. But now I've got more and more people that are stepping up to support. And it's definitely been a project, or definitely been a process to teach people in a way that empowers them rather than, and encourages them to take their own leadership and add their own flavor to what it is that they're doing. So yeah, it's still something that I'm definitely learning more and more about, but it takes a group of really passionate people, because it is a lot of work to do this stuff, but it's really rewarding at the same time. Something that I learned from my ex-boyfriend, who was the event producer. He said that the person that gets the most out of an event is the person that produces it. So I've met so many different people in doing these events and gotten so many fascinating connections that all of those connections are, priceless compared to the amount of, effort that has gone into all of this. So yeah, well, and plus just the knowing that I'm contributing. So yeah, that sort of answers your question, but it's still something I'm kind of figuring out for myself.
Well, I think it is an evolving process. And I think what makes that somewhat challenging in our society is even our definition of leadership is changing as we kind of evolve, even things like our organizational structures that we work within in a business environment or even in a science environment. It seems like more and more leadership is not necessarily about being like a kind of typical CEO of a 30,000 employee company. Instead, it seems like leadership comes from what you were saying, empowering others, teaching others, educating others, and not trying to do a ton yourself. Instead, understanding the importance of, I think, multi-generational projects that it's important to pass the baton on so that these values and these communities can continue to evolve and grow. And so I think, one caution that a lot of people have in starting a psychedelic community is they're worried that they've maybe never had any leadership positions before, or, they're just nervous about being open about starting a psychedelic community. For you, when you started the Aware Project, did you have to overcome any type of fears or hesitations in doing it? Or was it just more like, shit, I just had this amazing experience. I'm going to go do this and just see what happens. What was that like for you when you were just, deciding to get it up and going?
Yeah, no, there was definitely some fears involved. It wasn't necessarily in starting it per se in terms of the logistics. I had been around, I guess I'm a pretty determined person. And, it's like, I don't know, I kind of feel like letting go of perfectionism is something that is an important lesson, and just kind of getting things out there as best you can. And because if you never start, because it's not perfect, then, you don't get anywhere. But then, the main fears were, and I had, several long nights of conversations with my boyfriend at the time about, fully coming out of the closet as a person that, as a psychedelic, what I like to call a psychedelic ambassador. And, I was like, I'm really putting myself out there in a way that's irreversible, given, that everything stays on the web somehow. So I'm really committing myself to this as a kind of a cause, I suppose, and the potential repercussions of that. Luckily, there's more and more of us coming out of the closet. And so I feel like we're also getting some safety in numbers at this time. I went to the Women's Visionary Congress, which is a women's psychedelic conference that happens north of San Francisco. And they had a couple there that were some of the people that were part of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love that made the orange sunshine acid of the 60s and 70s. And we basically had story time with this couple, and man, they had some wild stories about running from the police and being in hiding and then getting arrested. And it was a much more openly aggressive, obviously they're also making acid. So, I'm not doing that, but it was a different time. And I think we can be a little bit more bold now. We need to make sure, and at the beginning of every one of my events, I say, they're creating a safe space here for a conversation, but please don't talk about buying, selling, or making any of these substances, or seeking practitioners or people to get them from, because we're using our freedom of speech. And, despite all of the other degradation of our rights, I think we're still have a little bit of freedom of speech.
Fingers crossed. Maybe. I'm crossing
fingers crossed. Yeah. It was a little scary. And, I still don't, even after doing it for this amount of time, I don't know if I fully grasp the safety concerns and the implications of this. But
why did you do it? If it was that scary, why did you go ahead and go forth with it?
Because that experience that I had with 5-MeO was just so powerful. It felt to me like it was a human right and like a soul right to be able to have that kind of experience, to be able to connect back with ourselves, back with our soul, back to the source, however you want to call it. And all of, a lot of our current religions and spirituality have made these cheap facsimiles and have watered it down so that we don't actually have any I think all of the sacraments that were given in most of the religions now are inert, whereas psychedelics are definitely ert. So, it was just, I felt like other people should be able to have this experience if they want to.
Great. That's I think, also I think that's what inspires a lot of people, frankly, is it's hard when you have such a transformative experience. And when you are in a position where you can do something. I think, this is something that I talk about as I've done some of these seminars on microdosing in various places. I was talking with Terry Krebs the other day, or a couple weeks ago, when I was in Oslo doing one with Emma Sophia, and we were hanging out after, and we were talking about microdosing and, how there's a lack of science with microdosing and blah, 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 blah. And I go, Terry, look, it's not about the science, or it's not even about microdosing. This is about giving people an opportunity to be more open about using these substances in a way that's responsible and can help them to heal and can help them to touch into the source. And thankfully, that like you touched on, there are a lot of us who can come out of the closet. Either, like, from my perspective, my income and my reputation is not really tied to a job or a boss. I can kind of do and want as I say. I come from a middle-class family. I'm a white male, all these things. Right. So I think this even puts the onus on those who can do it to do it, because frankly, there are thousands of if not hundreds of thousands of Black people in the States who can't even talk about their cannabis use. There are now potentially hundreds of thousands of immigrants who can't even talk about their cannabis use because they will get deported by ICE if that happens. Like, it's some really fucked up shit that's happening right now with the drug war and with all these new immigration laws. So I think it makes it even that much more critical for those who can to do it, and to do it in a way that's comfortable for the position that they're in. But I think hiding behind the shame and the stigma of psychedelic use, while it may have made sense even as recent as 5 years ago, like you were emphasizing, there are a number of people who we can stand now in solidarity with about these experiences. And I think the paranoia that permeates psychedelic culture still today is more of a projection from past trauma with what happened in the 60s than kind of a rational understanding of what would actually happen in today's day and age.
Yeah, the concept of sort of privilege, written a really excellent article on in the Symposia magazine by Natalie Ginsburg called "Privilege and Safety in the Psychedelic Community." Really fascinating. And I mean, part of what shifted me over to quit my previous career too was that I felt like, okay, we're not going to save the environment and save the animals, which is kind of what was my driving force before, going into environmental science, until we heal people. And so, and I was like, okay, well, maybe there's still not quite enough people doing environmental science, but at the same time, there's still way more than people doing psychedelic science and psychedelic therapy. And so I'm like, okay, well, I feel like because I know these things, I need to make this kind of a decision to step up and do this. And yeah, being, privileged as a white middle to upper class white person, I have a lot more leeway than a lot of other people in the community. So yeah, it's, to be able to start to use our voices and also I think change the public the way we describe what the Aware Project is that our goal is to change the public conversation about psychedelics and give a new face to psychedelia. So me as maybe a younger white person that, that can look very quote unquote normal if I need to and have this science background and be able to speak in this particular way is not what the standard paradigm is saying what a person does psychedelics. They think, the rhetoric tells you that you're a drug beat or a hippie or you've dropped out of, you can't hold down a job or, it's a lot of different perceptions. And so as we all, start to come out of the closet, we show people that people who use these things cross all social and racial and economic boundaries.
And I think that's a really good point to end on, is that almost like a call to action or an encouragement or an inspirational message of, I think psychedelic culture and what's going on in psychedelia and with the psychedelic research and psychedelic therapy, and even more kind of cultural pushes like what you were doing at the Aware Project and what we're trying to do at the Third Wave, is it's not about being the other now. It's not about being the counterculture. Instead, like you just emphasized, it's looking at ways to integrate the psychedelic experience into a more mainstream perspective. And as we talked about earlier in our conversation, people are craving this and people really need this because they've been without spirit and without connection for a very long time. And these medicines or tools or entheogens or whatever you want to call them, I think are a critical aspect of helping us to reconnect to what we've been missing to a large degree.
For sure. Oh, I'll say one more thing. I see us as these like edge dwellers, and we're kind of going as these scouts out to the edge of consciousness and seeing, okay, this is the direction to go. All right. And then coming back to the rest of society and being like, hey guys, we need to course correct here. So yeah. that's why I think it's really important for us to come back and then be able to communicate.
Absolutely. So where can people find you? People who are listening to this podcast, can you just tell us about like your website and maybe where people can get more information about what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So the Aware Project website is awareproject.org. And our sister project or sister organization is called Inner Space Integration, which is innerspaceintegration.com. And we have integration services for people in the greater Los Angeles area and remote counseling as well. So that's something that I'm still building up with a group of people. And then my personal website is ashleybooth.net. And there's contact forms on all of those. So most of it all goes to me.
Great. Well, Ashley, thanks again for joining us and delving into an array of interesting topics, including, your own experiences with 5-MeO-DMT and what you've been doing at the Aware Project. It's really been a pleasure to talk with you and dig into these topics. So, just again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yo, thanks for listening to the podcast and welcome back to This Week in Psychedelics. This Week in Psychedelics. Personal update, I'm in Berlin, which is a fucking cool city. We did seminars this past weekend. We did a seminar in Copenhagen on Saturday, April 8. We had 250 people at a microdosing seminar, and then we had a microdosing seminar on April 9 in Berlin and had another 250 people. So this is really blowing up. We are planning an event in Portland, Oregon, in combo with the guys at Symposia, for April 30 in Portland, Oregon. So if you live in Portland, you want to come see me talk, do a microdosing seminar, hear people talk about microdosing, learn more information, hear some of the research, get up on that, okay? Get up on that. Okay, other announcement is we will be live streaming Jim Fadiman's presentation at Psychedelic Science about the preliminary research that's coming out about microdosing. No one knows about this yet. This is the first time that anyone publicly will know about actual research that has been gathered specific to microdosing. Jim is going to be presenting it the morning of April 21, I think 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Friday, April 21. We will live stream that presentation. So if you're interested in the preliminary science and research around microdosing, go ahead and check out our page. We'll have a direct link to sign up and register for that live stream. And it will be, I believe, at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on April 21. In other news, the University of Hertfordshire is doing a survey about the use of ketamine and novel psychoactive substances, legal highs. Basically, it aims to evaluate the level of knowledge and awareness of the use of novel psychoactive substances. It's completed anonymously and only takes about 10 minutes to complete. All of it is anonymous and secure. There is no personal data. So if you want to help out on that survey, we will provide a link in the show notes. April 19. Guess what day that is? It's fucking Bicycle Day, guys. Fucking Bicycle Day. April 19, 419, before 420, which is obviously the I get so stoned I can't function day. 419 is Bicycle Day. It is when Albert Hoffman took the first significant dose of LSD and rode his bicycle home and proceeded to trip the fuck out in the small village of the name escapes me, but it's close to Zurich in Switzerland. So if you're in Portland or you're in the Bay Area or you're in New York or DC or wherever, Europe somewhere, reach out to your local psychedelic society. Most people are doing Bicycle Day events and get involved. Go to the Bicycle Day event, go meet other people who take psychedelics and have a fucking great time with them. So Bicycle Day is on April 19. Make sure you get out and join your local group. Last thing for this week in psychedelics, the BBC just did a long segment on microdosing. They wrote an article, but more importantly, they did a 15-minute video where they interviewed 3 different people in the UK who microdose. One microdoses with mushrooms, one microdoses with LSD for mental health purposes, and one microdoses with LSD for professional purposes. So kind of the typical spectrum of people who are microdosing. There were 2 males and 1 female. It's a good video. The journalist also interviewed a researcher from Imperial College. We heard the typical things against microdosing. There's no scientific research yet and blah, 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 blah. But overall, very, very good. There were only a couple minor issues. For example, the one qualm that the BBC had was, people are taking this too much and then going to work. That's a big risk. Well, not really. Just fucking have a little bit of common sense. Take a small amount the first time you microdose. This is what I talk about in all my seminars as well. Just take a small amount the first couple times you microdose. Make sure you're comfortable with it before you try to go in a public position with it. Overall, it's a very, very well done piece. I highly recommend checking it out. I was quite pleased with it. And that's that. Excellent piece to check out. So guys, thanks for tuning in again for this week in Psychedelics. If you like the podcast, leave a review. We would appreciate it. We would really appreciate it. And yeah, have a great rest of your Sunday, Monday, week, month, year, life. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Psychedelia Podcast with Paul Austin. Want more psychedelic information? Go to our website at thethirdwave.co and register for our email list and newsletter. Also, please consider donating to The Third Wave via our Patreon page. Donations make this podcast possible. Psychedelics have the potential to transform lives. By donating, you enable us to continue to inform people about the benefits of these powerful substances.